Now, South Africa is on a diplomatic drive to retain its status as one of the beneficiaries of the African Growth and Opportunity Act. This, as the early and long-term reauthorization of the U.S. legislation will provide policy certainty for investors. The drive comes as Pretoria-Washington relations have been deteriorating for years. Business Day's journalist Thando Maeko has been following these developments and joins us now. Thank you so much for your time, Thando. Now, a lot of us know about the SA-US tensions from the difference in alignment when it comes to Russia. But even before that, South Africa's participation in Agoa has come into question, right?
Yes, that was in 2014 where the US actually reviewed South Africa's participation in Agoa because it is considered a middle-income country, and Agoa is supposed to benefit countries which are lower income. But South Africa was able to retain its status as an Agoa beneficiary at that time.
It hasn't been a very even picture either, has it, Thando? We've seen, phone calls that were friendly between the president of the U.S. and ourselves of recent, but we've also seen, some senators in the U.S. calling for South Africa to lose their benefits. And so it is a bit tricky to see a cohesive picture about what our efforts might result in.
Yes, and we must remember that Agoa is a unilateral trade agreement, so it really is up to the U.S. to decide whether or not South Africa retains its beneficiary status, which will be crucial because trade between Agoa accounts for 20% of trade between the US and South Africa. South Africa is the largest sub-Saharan trade partner in Africa for the US. But like you said, Thando, it is under threat because we have the legislation passed by bipartisan lawmakers calling for the review of trade relations between South Africa and the US because of South Africa's stance on various geopolitical issues, such as the war between Israel and Hamas, and also the war between the Ukraine and Russia.
It's quite interesting also, Thando, that you mentioned that Agoa is unilateral, so the U.S. really does have the final say. But has the U.S. been appreciative, or has it expressed its appreciation for the fact that it also does benefit from Agoa, and it's not just SA and the rest of sub-Saharan Africa that, gets all the benefits in this agreement?
I think the U.S. so far, the U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai, the U.S. President Joe Biden, and the U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken have all expressed their willingness for Agoa to be extended. Whether or not that includes South Africa, we're yet to see. But I think on both sides, there is an appreciation that because of South Africa's sophisticated port and rail system, and also that it's the most developed economy on the continent, excluding South Africa will actually betray Agoa's intentions, which is to spur development on the continent.
Also interesting here, Thando, I guess, is the competition that comes from Russia, that comes from China, also making a bid there for South Africa and other African countries. I'm wondering how we're taking stock of that as well. That, of course, this is a unilateral trade agreement, but there's also competition.
Yeah, so you must remember that one of the requirements of Agoa is that the beneficiary should not engage in any activities that undermine U.S. state security, right? And so I think over the last 2 years, South Africa's perceived closeness to the U.S. rivals has spurred that bipartisan legislation that I've spoken on earlier. But South Africa, in these instances, has been on a diplomatic drive to explain to the U.S. its stance regarding China, its relationship with China, its relationship with Russia, and its stance on the Israel and Palestine issue. We're yet to see whether this diplomatic drive will actually reap or produce any good fruit, which is obviously to remain a trade partner with the U.S.
Well, now obviously there is, the proposal for a complete review of SA-US relations, and of course the delegation that is there in the US has gone to lobby against that. But I'm wondering, Thando, if this should provide a sense of nervousness that there is this proposal. Of course, I know that there are a few stages that it does need to get through before it's actually signed into law. Should that give a sense of nervousness, or maybe just an opportunity, for a platform for proper engagement on better terms?
I think, like you said, it does provide a platform for engagement on better terms. I mean, the SA delegation that actually went to the Agoa forum includes the newly appointed Trade Minister, Park Stow, along with the Deputy Minister, Andrew Whitfield. And they have gone to different stakeholders, including lawmakers in Washington, explaining South Africa's role, not only on the continent, but how it benefits to have South Africa as a trade partner to the US, and actually probably a review of trade relations will actually do much more harm than good to the relations between the two countries.
I'm also keen here to, of course, be in a position as South Africa to assert ourselves still, part of the how we've been thinking about, for instance, what the decisions on Russia or even the decisions on Israel and the issue with Palestine is that we've been asserting ourselves, as members of the global kind of community here. But an important part here, Thando, is also South Africa maybe not overplaying its hand, finding a balance between being assertive and then also understanding that we also have quite a bit to lose here, even with Agoa.
Sorry, I didn't hear that question. Kindly repeat.
I was just asking about the balance between asserting ourselves as a sovereign versus also, of course, being able to not overplay our hand.
Oh, yes. So that's really a tightrope that South Africa has to walk on. Although on both sides, I have had a conversation with state security on this side as well, that have said that the relations between South Africa and the US, although they've been strained since over the last 2 years because of the geopolitical environment, the relationship has somewhat, the strenuous relationship has somewhat subsided, and that there's appreciation on both sides that we need each other. But what is clear from the events that have happened, especially in the US Congress, and the legislation that was passed to review South Africa's trade relations with the US, there's still a bit of suspicion on the side of the US on South Africa's stance. That's why South Africa has decided to send its top salesman, which is the Trade and Industry Minister, to the US to once again explain its stance on these geopolitical issues. This is not the first time, it's not the second time, it's not the third time. So South Africa is really putting its all behind ensuring that its relations with the US are favorable. But at the same time, like you said, Thando, South Africa is also not willing to really change its stance just to appease the US.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and for your insights. Of course, we will be looking closely at the conclusions that do come out of the Agoa Forum this week. That was Thando Maeko, journalist for Business Day.